Welcome back to Shrink by Quint, the podcast where I take big psychotherapeutic ideas and big cultural shifts and shrink them into something you can carry in your back pocket. Today, we're going to be looking at language, consciousness, and alignment, the question at the very heart of AGI. One of the oddest developments of recent years is that an idea once confined to philosophers and contemplatives has suddenly become central to artificial intelligence. The idea is this: language is not reality. The words we use are not the things they describe. And once we forget that, trouble generally follows. Alan Watts saw this clearly, so did Krishnamurti, and later Eckhart Tolle. My own aunt, the Jungian analyst Marian Woodman, spent her life showing how easy it is to confuse an inner symbol with the living person beneath it. Taoism put it more briefly: if you can speak it, it is not the Tao. These were once fringe insights, but now they are surprisingly relevant to AGI research. Because a large part of building artificial intelligence is building systems that manipulate symbols. And the question, which now matters far more than anyone expected, is whether symbol manipulation can ever become consciousness, or whether language, however sophisticated, always remains a kind of shadow play. Consider how this works in ordinary life. The word self is just a label, yet we cling to it as if it was a fixed, enduring object. The same applies to identities and national stories. So a flag is only a cloth, but people will kill for it anyway. We believe as though the symbol was the reality. And sometimes we even prefer it that way, because symbols feel cleaner and, well, easier than the messy unpredictability of the living world. Marian Woodman noticed that the psyche does the same thing internally. Archetypes can guide us, but once they harden into literal roles, they begin to control us. You do not live your life so much as act out a script. Taoism's warning suddenly seems very practical. Every name conceals more than it reveals. Language encourages this confusion. It breaks the world into categories that are convenient for speaking but not necessarily accurate. Life is far less tidy than nouns and verbs imply. Alan Watts suggested that suffering begins the moment the map becomes more real than the territory. All of which brings us to AI. Systems like large language models operate entirely inside this symbolic realm. They predict patterns in text, not patterns in reality. Some researchers think consciousness can emerge from this. Daniel Dennett, Michael Graziano, Stanislas Dehaene. They all believe that if a system builds a rich enough self-model, something like awareness could appear. Others think this is wishful thinking. John Searle, Dreyfus, Pearl, Emily Bender. They argue that without bodies, sensations, and real-world grounding, machines will remain symbol shufflers. Impressive, certainly, but not conscious. Yet a more uncomfortable question sits beneath both positions. Does it matter? If an AI can soothe loneliness, mirror emotions, and keep the dopamine circuits gently humming, do we really care whether it's conscious? Human beings bond easily with things that merely feel responsive. If the simulation is good enough, the distinction between a mind and an imitation of one becomes psychologically, fuzzy. Alignment then becomes less about controlling a superintelligent entity and more about understanding our own vulnerabilities. Because if what we crave is the feeling of being understood, prediction may be enough to satisfy us. What's like to say that we imagine ourselves as swimmers in a river, forever battling the current, when in fact we are the current. Krishnamurti called this seeing without the word. Tolle called it presence. Woodman called it embodiment. Taoism would say that life goes better when we stop trying to force it into our categories and simply pay attention. In the age of AI, this old advice becomes unexpectedly relevant. The ability to tell the difference between the symbol and the real is no longer a philosophical luxury. It's becoming a practical skill. It shapes how we relate to technology, how we interpret its behavior, and how we preserve the distinctly human parts of our experience. Because if we lose sight of that difference, we risk outsourcing not just our thinking, but our sense of being alive. Thanks for listening to Shrink by Quint. If today's episode resonated, share it with someone who might need it. And remember, rebuilding yourself is the most important part of recovery. See you next time.